Hi there, it's Imogen here, and I am joined again by Shay Seaborne, trauma awareness educator. And we wanted to come on today and talk about anger, and in particular, how it can be a force for positive change. Because we were discussing this earlier this week with the members of my study group, the ongoing weekly study group that we're in, and it just got a lot of interest, and there were just people really kind of grateful for the information. And anyway, so we wanted to bring some of that to you into this conversation. So I think maybe we should just start with, I think a lot of us, me included, um, my tendency is to try and avoid anger.
Mhm.
Um, and I think a lot of people suppress, repress, avoid anger, probably for a variety of reasons. But what do you think's behind that?
Like you said, multiple reasons. A lot of us didn't have healthy anger modeled for us, especially in childhood. We may have had, parents who were explosive or who repressed the anger themselves, and then were, passive aggressive or otherwise let it leak out in small but harmful ways.
Mm,
Our culture tells us, don't be angry, just let it go, forgive and forget, and tries to tell us that we need to overcome our anger, which is incorrect. It's to do that
mm,
is to harm our bodies. Also, we don't learn in school or anywhere how to appropriately deal with anger, to express it appropriately. And boy, the portrayal in the media usually shows aggressive male heroes and anti-heroes and crazy women. Crazy, if women are angry, they're crazy, and nobody's dealing with their anger appropriately. And a legitimate also fear a lot of people have is that they will lose control. If they get angry, they'll lose control and hurt somebody. And so they don't want to do that. And I understand that. As a kid,
yeah.
I was afraid that I didn't want to have kids because I was afraid that I would start hitting them and never stop, because that's what happened in my family.
Mm,
So
yeah.
how could I
Mm.
possibly, be a friend with my anger?
So I think this actually points to a really important point that I wanted to bring up is I think to really differentiate and the behaviors that can come from anger with feeling the emotion of anger. It feels like what people are anxious about is behaviors they don't want.
Mhm.
Although in Maine, there's also a lot of ideas about positive and negative emotions, whereas I
Mhm.
don't think any emotion in and of itself is positive or negative. I think there's a lot of uh, more current research that would say that
Mhm.
we need the whole gamut of our emotional landscape if we can access it and be with it and behave appropriately with it.
Mhm.
That's, the term emotional intelligence has been coined. That emotions are signals that we care about something, for
Mhm.
instance. And I
Yeah,
think
anger
anger,
usually means
yeah,
there's something happened that we care about.
hmm yeah. Um, so, what are the costs of this
Of repressing,
repression, suppression,
yeah,
avoidance?
of anger. They're
Yeah.
actually quite heavy. Um, they can cause elevated stress levels, problems in our relationships. It can lead to chronic illness, chronic pain, and chronic and mental health conditions as well. Um, and as well as somatic symptoms like headaches and bowel problems, back pain. Those can all be rooted in repressed anger. And
That
also,
would be a lot of tension in the body if you just think, I
mhm,
mean, it's the nervous system, it's everything, but if you just think on the muscular level,
mhm.
um, it's not a relaxed,
Yes, because
released muscles that are
yeah,
associated with that emotion.
because when
Or
we're
certainly
angry,
when we're holding on to it, yeah.
yeah, it activates our fight response, which demands physical activity.
Hmm.
And so if we're going around angry because we haven't addressed the anger, we're constantly activating our fight response, which, as we know, causes all kinds of problems with hormones and long-term effects on the body. Uh, these hormones affect us at the cellular level all the
Mm.
time. So we need to be aware of that and
Yeah.
deal with the anger appropriately so it doesn't cause us problems.
Yeah, I'm thinking of, you talked earlier, you mentioned just how it can kind of leak out, and I'm thinking how
Mhm.
that could be a really detrimental to a relationship. I just know for myself,
Mhm.
I might not have realized I was angry or annoyed about something, but then I'm just being irritable with my husband, for instance, and making little snippy comment. So it's not good for a relationship when it's not
Right.
resolved appropriately. So
Right. And when we repress one emotion because it's bad, we can't help also repressing other emotions. And
mm,
so it not only limits our spectrum of human experience, it also makes it harder for us to have healthy relationships.
yeah, because it's limiting my capacity for actual connection.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
can't
So
connect to yourself, you're not going to connect very well to
mhm,
somebody else.
yeah, yeah. Um, so anger as a force for positive change. You mentioned that it's associated with the fight response. Now that
Mhm.
doesn't sound very positive, but I also understand that it's a mobilizing for action.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah,
yeah, say more.
the fight response is another one that we often denigrate, except when it's entertainment or men defending their honor. That's okay. uh, Sorry, I just lost my thought. Yeah. So when like I said, when we're angry, it activates the fight response, which can be a problem if we don't know what to do with it. But where was this? Uh, when it's balanced by cognitive thought, by using the prefrontal cortex, it can be regulated and directed constructively. So slowing down and making thoughtful decisions about what you're going to do in response to whatever it is that's prompted your anger uh, is actually very beneficial to you as a living organism. Um, uh, as you know, I've met a lot of injustice in my life, including in the healthcare system, including non-consensual surgery, which is just incredibly outrageous, and a so-called justice system that says it's okay that he did this to me, and I'm just a little too sensitive, and informed consent isn't really that. So that's institutional betrayal on top of the heinous act of cutting tissue off my body without consent. And it fills me with rage when I think about it. I feel it like activating myself right now. So being that I've worked with you all these years and I'm very good at noticing what's going on in my body, even as I'm talking to you, I'm working to regulate my nervous system so that I don't get all janked up and come out of my window of tolerance just talking about it. Um,
Mm.
so
So yeah, go ahead.
I've used my anger to take steps toward justice because uh, justice and abuse especially requires, I mean, our bodies require it. We need to feel safe, and we can't feel safe when our perpetrators are running around doing the same thing to other people and it's deemed as all right. So for 3 years after the non-consensual surgery, every time I got upset or angry, I did one little thing in the direction of justice. I looked up an address to file a complaint with, or wrote a paragraph, or read one page of the operating notes, or whatever it was, a tiny little thing, just to have a positive thing to do with that anger. And after 3 years, I had basically a full legal brief with all the evidence tied together. That was really actually quite remarkable.
Yeah. It's slightly off topic, but that's also the kind of benefit of just doing one small thing here, one small thing. It's kind of in line with our kind of drip approach in different, that then this much bigger thing ends up being done. But I'm also just thinking how, from what I know about the stress response, and it seems to me like, I don't know if anger is the stress response.
Yes.
I don't know. Yes. Okay. But I know one of the ways we can kind of complete that stress cycle is through action.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you did. And another way to help with that, well, one is this kind of this awareness of what you're feeling. And this is, part of the whole body intelligence work that we do, that we become more and more able to tune into ourselves and be aware of what's going on in our body and emotions, because it's all interlinked and not separate. And we work with this idea of even saying to ourselves, or saying out loud to ourselves, I am noticing that I'm angry right now, or whatever the emotion or feeling is. And that there's a power in that. There's complete acknowledgement of what you're feeling, but you're not, there's a tiny bit of space, so you're not kind of owned by it. And you've maybe have some sense of a tiny bit of control, because you're not, it's just not the anger overwhelming you, and you're just lashing out and shooting off an email without thinking about it, or saying something that you're going to later regret.
So many things we can do with our anger that are inappropriate, or even have blowback on us. But what you said, having the observer's mind, which we develop through our practices, and by just simply observing what's going on, that gives us a little space between what's happening in us and our response. So then we can choose what to do. And in a lot of cases, we can come away feeling better and more proud of ourselves for how we handled it.
I'm thinking, often we talk about fight or flight, right? So one response to feelings of anger could be to run away from it, but then we don't get the benefits of actually taking action that will really support our own agency and beliefs and values, and those sorts of things. So
if we let our fear of our anger cause us to run, then we may end up feeling worse about ourselves. And yet it can be very hard for people, especially if they've experienced trauma around anger, which is very common, especially in developmental trauma. Sorry, I just lost my thought again.
It's very common to want to run away from or remove yourself.
And when we can stay with our anger, we don't have to fight. Like we can, coming up with that document was a kind of fight for me. It felt like it to me. Like every time I did it, I was like, this feels good. This feels, one step in the right direction. And then when I finally had it finished, it really felt wonderful. The Deputy Attorney General told them to dismiss my case. So in a way, all that work was trashed, except that this is how I make justice with my words. I put everything I had into that document to make as tight a case as possible to have them put away. I couldn't control what the corrupt government does from there, but I know I've done everything I can. And that's a very satisfying feeling. And I know I made his butt pucker a couple times too. And that's very satisfying as well, because that changed the dynamic between us. That changed me
The
from his
power
victim
dynamic.
to, you know, oh, I can make you get scared too, mister.
I'm thinking that it's going to be very individual how each person responds and decides to behave and take action. You know, we all have different needs and wishes and desires, and we all have a totally different life experience, etc. But I think the key thing is that if you can develop the capacity to recognize the emotion and be with it in some way, in this kind of more spacious way, so you're not consumed by it, then you do have choices.
Yes.
And you know, and your choice may be, I'm noticing that I'm angry and I'm noticing it's too much for me to actually go near it doing anything about that, so I'm going to go do a really hard workout and get some of it out. You know, so that could be a conscious choice, and that's very different from just pushing and not understanding what's going on.
So, because that's actually engaging with and integrating the emotion and what brought it up, rather than trying to push it aside. You brought up an important point. Large muscle movement is really helpful in expressing anger safely. And it's good to have ideas of, you know, what would feel right to you and be safe. Like hitting the mattress with a tennis racket, it's not going to hurt anything, but it makes a really great sound and it feels good.
You know, especially if you're on your own, that if someone's with you, it's not hurting them, but they might be quite startled and it could dysregulate them. Let's put it like that. I'm noticing a comment from Marilyn, and she's just, I think this is an important, she said, I wouldn't use the word run away, but rather there are situations where removing myself from the person is a better choice. And absolutely, you know,
that was actually the thank you, Marilyn. That's actually what brings me back to the point I wanted to make. Fighting is the most dangerous stress response, because all the rest of them involve getting away from or disengaging from the threat, and fighting is the one where you're coming back at it. So it's the most potentially dangerous. So we normally wouldn't be using it very often. Like in the animal world, most animals don't actually fight. They posture and puff up and make noises and do all sorts of things to establish their dominance or their aggression without actually hurting each other. And in our culture, we suppress it until we blow up, and then, you know, we wonder why people go postal. So choosing to fight, although it's mostly chosen by the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, fighting comes at a cost. It does put you in danger, the actual physical fighting, unless you're play fighting. I have this thing for pool noodle fights, using them like sword fights. It is so fun. Because you can put a lot of force into it, really whap that person. But because of the dynamics of the noodle, it's like slow-mo martial arts movie or something. And it does make a satisfying sound when it whacks. And playful aggression with another person is really a wonderful outlet. and just very good for the relationship and for the body and the brain.
Mm. I also wanted to say the literal fight, like you say, is quite a dangerous thing. But using the mobilizing energy from the fight response in a well, in a chosen way, that you've decided, like, this isn't, use that to help you take an action, even if that's just writing a letter or something like that. I shouldn't say just, that could be
Any
a
action,
really big deal, writing a letter.
it doesn't have
but
to be a fight. It doesn't have to be a noodle fight,
but you
or
have
even
the energy to take an action that supports something that you care about.
Yeah, and it for me, a lot of times when my fight response is activated some but not extreme, that's when my clarity and drive just worked so well. The first time I wrote a letter to the editor of the Washington Post about the horrible mosquito control program in my county, I was really ticked off, and I just sat down and went, "Blah, blah, blah," and I looked up one thing for a fact to throw in there, and I sent it off, and they called me up and said, "Oh, we would like to run this as an op-ed. Is that okay?" And they put it on the right side in a box with a color picture and paid me $75. So make money.
So you
off
never know. But anyway, I'm just looking at the comments. Pool noodle fights, Marilyn's, yes, and they definitely can end in laughter, which is another great way to release stress
and build the connection. I swear, if we had pool noodle fights all over the place, the world would be much happier.
I'm thinking about, like, anger within a relationship. So it's maybe not deep injustice that's happened, but little annoyances that can still affect you quite deeply. But when they go unacknowledged and you're not really recognizing, like I was talking about before, when you're just kind of snipping and sniping at each other, and I think just the act is, if you have enough capacity to even just say, I'm noticing I'm getting really angry about this now. I think I need to go in the other room for a while. I don't know. But even that could be a very helpful thing in a relationship, right?
Yeah,
You're not actually going in for the fight, but you've
Mhm.
recognized what is going on and you've taken an action. So then you can even think about it and decide, is this something we need to talk about? There's actually something deep for going on here, whatever it is.
And yeah, saying out loud what we're experiencing actually causes our brains to squirt soothing chemicals. So when we say, I notice I'm feeling angry, immediately it helps us to start calming down.
So I think we've kind of alluded to it a few times, but the key thing is we need to be able to build this capacity to be with and choose how to act on our anger in ways that are healthy for us and others. So what would you say are some of the things that my body intelligence work, it's not the only thing, for sure, there's many things, but that in particular kind of help with this? I'm really thinking that we build the capacity to be able to pause, which again then gives us time to kind of have a moment of awareness.
Yes.
And that's building the interoception. That's the way of being able to sense what's going on in your own body more clearly. We all have this sense, but it can get diminished.
Yeah, especially in the traumatic developmental environments.
Yeah. So it helps you have choices. And also, you were saying it helps us stay in our window of tolerance, so we don't flip our lid. We did a video about that a while ago, which would be like, for instance, lashing out in anger. So we don't, we're able to not to go there where it's kind of out of our control.
Right.
Yeah.
And these kind of practices can help us widen our window of tolerance so that we can undergo more neurophysiological stress without being disrupted. Resilience. What else? The practices help regulate the nervous system, which, a regulated nervous system, number one, doesn't get angry as often. And number two is easier, has an easier time when anger does occur.
And is more easily able to use that anger as the catalyst, as we've been talking about, right? To act in a positive way for justice, for your well-being, to help other people, all of those things.
Yeah, and it's like a virtuous cycle. Using it as a catalyst can also help us stay in our window of tolerance because we're getting something satisfying out of what we're doing with it.
Anything else before we finish up? I'm trying to see how long we've been on here. Quite a while.
Just that being with awareness and acceptance of anger and understanding simple strategies, we can manage our anger in ways that are healthy, constructive, and lead to improved emotional well-being and interpersonal relationships and quality of life.
Sounds good to me. Yes. So Shay co-teaches Foundations of Regulation course, which is for people dealing with stress and trauma. And we have our next offering, kind of summer school, if you like. It's a 6-week online course starting on June 11th, and I can pop a link in the comments later if anyone's interested in that. And this is where we start learning how to pause and notice and think and be aware in ways that help support the regulation of our nervous system. Thank you all for being with us. Those of you here live, thank you for your comments. I see there's a few more. Marilyn just quickly asked, could you explain window of tolerance? So we'll just answer that before we finish up.
I like to think of it as like a river with boundaries. And when we're in the window of tolerance in the river, we are comfortable and we're able to respond to what is happening in the real time now, rather than worrying about what might happen or reacting to what did happen. And when we get out of the window of tolerance, we're either in chaos or rigidity or swinging wildly from one to the other. So we want to stay off the banks and in the river, in the flow.
Yeah. So the window of tolerance is when you can tolerate, you have capacity to be with emotions, you're more regulated. It doesn't mean you're calm all the time, but it means you can cope with the ups and downs. You're not,
flipping your lid,
lashing out. You're not getting super depressed. Depressed would be one, going in the one direction, and the other would be kind of like really activated and
neither one is good to be in for very long.
No. So need to be with all of that. Thank you so much, Shay. Thank you for those who've joined us. Anyone watching the replay have questions, put them in the comments. We'll get back to you, and we'll be back. I think we've got a few more things we might want to say about anger. Just to do a little teaser about anger as love, or as an act or the love side of anger. Interesting, right?
You're
Okay.
right.
All right. See you next time.